And we are live. Welcome, everybody. This is the first edition of the Frontend Teams weekly for Create Source Code, or the Frontend Create Source Code weekly, whichever way you want to say that. It's a new call, and the goal here is to discuss topics that are currently on our minds, any blockers, crazy ideas, concerns. It also allows us this time to use it for retro review, kickoffs. And with time, we also want to encourage and promote demoing in-flight work that you have. So demoing MRs, things that you might want to show to the team. So definitely worthwhile bringing up here in this call. So that's where I want to start. Welcome, everybody. And we already have our agenda filled. So I'm going to hand it over to Dennis. You have our first point.
Yeah. So the first one is rather than like a small fun exercise. So in this issue, which is linked in the agenda, Sean raised an interesting point. So whenever user tries to clone a project, they go to this clone button, and then they can pick, for example, to clone into the IntelliJ IDEA or to Xcode. And the problem is that we do not detect whether any of these are installed on the client's machine. So what this leads to is that JavaScript silently fails and throws in console without giving any notification to the user. The tricky part here is that, like speaking front-end language, we could get to the conclusion that, okay, it throws, so we have to use the try and catch. No, it doesn't work with this type of things, because this is not caught by try catch, unfortunately. So it just throws. I created the non-working draft in terms, it does solve the problem of the non-installed applications, but it messes up for the scenario where the application is actually installed. So it's like fixing one thing by breaking another one. So general front-end approach. It would be great to figure out, and I was actually stuck with this task. It was really interesting to figure out how actually we can do this on the front end, whether we can detect things like this somehow. Because in this particular case, it is the front-end task to notify the user that the application is not installed, to either show the alert. So what I did in my non-working draft is I show the alert with the link to download the application if user wants to use that application for their needs. But this sort of interferes with the case when the application is actually installed. So Jacques, you have the next sort of the first discussion point here. You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering if it's possible to ping these links or endpoints. Like in a normal HTTP protocol, it returns like status codes. I don't know if it's the same with these.
Ping, like what? Like just ping. The problem is that this is not the HTTP. This is not an HTTP link, right? This is completely different protocol.
So it doesn't return like any kind of a status code or anything like that?
Nope. No, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, this reminds me of I remember a couple of years ago, there was this huge, flaw in browsers where through the visited state of the link, we could violate the privacy of users, and we can guess whether they had been to certain websites. So I think browsers make it kind of hard to kind of like get smart about this. But did your non-working draft, Dennis, get anywhere closer to that, to understanding whether it's installed or not?
So the let me just share my screen for a second. Do you see my screen now? Yes. Okay. So let's get to this draft. So there are only 2 changes, surprisingly, but they are pretty interesting. So the one of those, the constants, let's increase the font size again. I guess it's gonna work out. So the I just have the constant for the environments. So what is coming into the constants is the sort of the ID, the protocol for that or another thing. So VS Code, JetBrains, and the Xcode. The title, which is shown in the clone dropdown, and the URL to download the latest version of this application. If user clicks, the application is not found, we show the alert suggesting user to go and download this application if that's what they want. So at least they have some sort of feedback. And it is implemented like this. So what do we do is we just get the URL the user from the link user clicked. We update the window location, and here comes the tricky part. We set the timeout for the second. I know this is lame. It's just a proof of concept. So in a second, we try to check whether we actually have we show the alert with the download link to that application. But the problem is that in this particular case, we are showing the alert still even if the application is opened. So this alert is staying on the screen even if the application is available and users are already in it. And I was trying to figure out how to detect whether the user has been getting to another application or something. So I tried to catch the things on before unload, because technically when that pop-up or alert is shown whether you want to open the Xcode application, for example, the on before unload event is fired for that thing. But again, it is fired before that alert is shown, so we have no idea whether alert is shown or not. And that event is fired no matter whether user has the application installed or not, because otherwise either user goes to the application or to the or they don't go anywhere. So anyway, this proof of concept shows the alert, provides user with ability to download the application, but it still shows the alert even if the user has the application installed, because I didn't find the way of saying, okay, user has moved to the application or user has installed the application installed. So it's we don't need to solve it now. It's just something interesting to play with and think about how to detect a really things undetectable on the front end, because front end by design has no access to the system, right? To know what applications are installed or not.
Like we're trying to detect dark matter or something here.
Yeah.
You don't have the sensors for it. So I put in the agenda link that I found on Google. But there's apparently a library. You're still sharing the screen, by the way, Dennis. They say that you can detect the presence of a custom protocol handler. I'm not sure if this will cause an issue, because some of the times what they do is that they try to open it, and this would eventually result in the browser trying to open the Xcode. So something to look at, I guess. I don't know.
This is and this is the moment when I'm very kind of frightened, because if in order to detect whether an application is installed or not, we have to pull in another package. This is where
No.
Why would we?
If it's doable, if this works, we know it's possible, and then we can reverse engineer that a little bit, and trying to see exactly how they're doing that and write our own code. But yes, I wouldn't want to integrate yet another package.
It's
thanks for bringing it up.
Great. Thanks for the link. It's interesting to see how they solve this. Could be
as a fun fact. This was a feature that I worked as an engineer when I was not a manager. back in
man.
God knows when, and it got featured. So it got featured at one of the Apple events, WWDC on stage. I took a screenshot and I posted and I sent it to my mom. Mom, my work is on Apple stage. So that was a nice moment in my career.
Wait
I got
a
a
second. So
button
you worked with this, and it still doesn't work.
at GitLab. Oh no, it does work. If you have Xcode installed, it does work.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just can't detect whether it opens or not. It was kind of like,
Yeah.
I think at the time we're kind of like, oh yeah, as a follow-up, we'll try to detect this later.
Yeah.
And now here we are, 2023. But
it wouldn't be
this is my legacy.
a big problem if we would somehow notify user by any any other mean other than throwing into the console. But that's the problem. Like, we don't have the way to detect this.
Yeah, I think at the time what we decided was so from the perspective of like stepping out of the UI thing, but more into the user experience of things. If you're clicking to open in the Xcode, a project that is Apple based, you yourself, the user, is very likely somebody who's used to this sort of stuff. So when nothing happens, you'd be very clear that, oh, my Xcode is not properly installed or something. So we're kind of like brushed it off a little bit, but regardless, it would be nice to catch that. So yeah,
it's in the backlog, but it's just something.
Yeah,
I thought it's interesting to take a
nice play. Cool.
Yeah.
Right. Next point. You have it as well.
Yes. The next one. So this one is much more in line with our work, really. I've created this issue about the view applications we have on the repository view. At the moment, we have 10 unnamed view applications together with 3 or like 2, 3, depending on what feature flags you have enabled. So in total, it's about up to 13, 14 feature view applications on the repository view. So surprisingly enough, so if you take a look at the issue at the link, some of the applications are not even used on the repository view. They are meant to be enabled only on the blob view. Nevertheless, they get bootstrapped on the repository view. So some of those are instantly like I have included the screenshot where all the active applications are highlighted, and clearly the ref selector and the project selector with new file, new folder, they reside together, so they live next to each other, so they can be merged into one view application. It's a bit more complex with other things, but at least we can start with cleaning up and not bootstrapping the applications which are not needed for the repository view. Because again, those are not named, and for some of the applications, it took me a while to figure out what those applications are, because it's just app and there is no child in that application. So it's kind of hard to understand what application that is. But I think I have identified all of those, and it would be great to clean up a bit.
Thanks. My feedback here, Epic sounds great to track this effort, I guess. One of the things that would be interesting to understand is exactly like what would be the benefits of performance. And one of the things that might not be very apparent here is the page that you're in is the same view app that is going to render the blob, right? So it's still the same. So could it be relevant to preload the app that is going to be probably eventually needed once we get to the blob, having that user journey being very likely? So there's a trade-off there between, preloading the app so that it's ready right away when the blob is rendered, to make that faster. So that'll be a nice conversation to have in the Epic, exactly the benefits. What are the most beneficial apps to integrate into that same app? But we can have that discussion asynchronously. That doesn't have to be here.
the one obvious reason to remove the applications that are not used is that it will make working with this view a bit easier, because like when you look at this list of no named apps in the when you go to the view tab of the DevTools, it's kind of hard to realize what is this, especially when you hover over this application and no element is highlighted. So it makes things a bit harder to understand and to figure out what element to get to. But there are some things that we can just convert to the view application in the same effort or in additional effort. And yeah, I will convert this into the epic and split into like brainstorm the ideas of how we can combine these things and combine and split.
Yep. Please bring the issue we have for the find file app. So for bringing the find file app into the repository app. Do you have that issue? I can find it for you. So this was a remnant from the blob refactor of like making the blob view part of the repository view app. One of the next things we would like to absorb was the find file, right? Because it just makes that switching between find file and the repository tree and the blob view, all of that much faster between like context switching. And it's a very common thing. Like you find a file, you go to the blob view, right? You're watching the file repository, you're finding something, you can't find it, you go to the find file. So that's probably got a very obvious one. So I'm going to put the link to issue here later, but please bring that over to that epic once you create.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Natalia, you have the next one. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. So this is something I've been recently working on, and I guess Igor has the most context of it. So when I do call the fork sync mutation, sometimes like once it was taking really a lot of time for this process happening on backend, so like 1 hour or something. And I don't know. I can demo what I have now if you guys are interested. But yeah, I was just the question I have. Maybe I should stop do HTTP polling at some point if it takes too long.
Yeah, 1 hour. It's really long time. I guess maybe an error.
I was like 46 commits behind, and for some reason it was
Yeah, 46 is not too many commits. I guess maybe just a guess. Maybe an error happens in the background job, some exception. So
yeah, but there was no error returned or anything. It was just like
no error
keep loading.
Yeah, it's just like an internal error that happens in the background. It's just a guess. And regarding stopping the polling, it's actually makes sense to me. But I guess currently on front end we have polling implemented, which is just polling every second or every 2 seconds. Yeah, like every period. But maybe it's possible to have like a gradual, incremental period. If it's, I guess that would be like one of the solutions, I guess. Yeah, if we like ideally it would be like a Fibonacci sequence, yeah, like 1, 1, 2, 5, something like this. Yeah, but it definitely makes sense to stop polling. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'm wondering, Igor,
That
while we have you here, can it be that actually the polling makes actually things worse, because by constantly polling we are overloading the backend with this?
Yeah, it's not like the prettiest solution, yeah, but with current implementation, what do we have? We have a background job, and which and on front end we can't get the status whether this background job finished or not until we explicitly ask. So one of the solutions is WebSocket, for example, yeah, to have a WebSocket connection and receive a signal. Another solution is to constantly poll the endpoint. And that particular endpoint that we are working with, Natalia, is being cached, and it's quite like fast. Doesn't I think so. Yeah, it doesn't produce a huge load. But yeah, it's a good question, and on this iteration we have it like this.
So Igor, one of the contexts I wanted to bring up here is in the code review group, we've been dabbling with moving things from polling and smart polling on the front end into GraphQL subscription. And there the problem is trickier because we have to migrate things to GraphQL and then to GraphQL subscriptions.
Yeah.
Maybe we can create an issue as a follow-up to move this check to a GraphQL subscription, because that seems like the best of both worlds. Like the browser doesn't have to do any work, and the front end is just notified from the backend once that thing is completed, and it will be immediate. And that way, it's just the better experience overall. So, does that make sense to open an issue for that?
Yeah, makes sense to me. Currently, we implemented it using GraphQL endpoints. Action item for me is to read about GraphQL subscriptions, because I have to admit I'm
amazing
not educated on this topic here.
So it's amazing. There's I can put a link here to the efforts we're doing on there, because it's usually actually, since we have, how much time do we have? Oh, 3 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to link to an epic where we have both the backend and the front end work for GraphQL subscription. So essentially, the backend adds like a trigger to where the work is done or where you don't want to notify it, and the front end just needs to, instead of doing a query or a mutation, needs to do a subscription to that. So take a look at those examples. But please, who wants to open an issue, please claim it as a volunteer. Igor or Natalia, please, one of you tackle that. She raised the arm.
I will do.
Thanks. Igor, 2 minutes to go through that.
Yeah, I will be quick, so I can share my screen. So we have created this issue. Yeah, it's related to code intelligence. Yeah, and currently it's sometimes it doesn't work correctly. For example, for cases like this, we have GitLab shell project, we have a file, and for example, this line of code, yeah, it should display a pop-up for every word here, for every variable, but and it worked before highlight.js because we wrapped every lexem in a span. Yeah, and that's why it was possible to implement a logic like this, that, for example, start char is 4, and it's actually meant like the fourth span in the div. But with highlight.js, sometimes it happens that it wraps like the whole word in a single span. Yeah, and yeah, it actually makes sense from performance perspective, but it's actually now doesn't work correctly sometimes. So yeah, my question was whether we can have a look at this issue, and yeah, particularly, is it possible to wrap every word in a span, or do we have concerns from performance perspective?
Yeah, I think if we wrap every word in a span, that will definitely have a big performance impact on the front end, at least, like rendering all that HTML. But we can definitely take a look. I'm not sure, I haven't actually had a look at that bug yet. Like, we don't really have control over how highlight.js wraps these words. The only thing we can do is like create our own plugin to individually wrap the words. But like I said, that'll have a big performance impact.
Jack, what I know what you're talking about with the performance here, but what if we would do this asynchronously after the blob is rendered? We do go through the rendered part of the blob and just wrap that afterwards, so it won't affect the loading performance. It might affect technically the time to the time to interactive if we do it very heavily, but that might be an interesting exercise to play with. Like we allow the blob to be rendered, and then we do all the magic and sprinkle all this unicorn dust afterwards.
Yeah, I think we can definitely take a look at that. So after everything is loaded, we go through the page and like just wrap all the words in an individual span. Like certainly something we can look at. The only thing is like doing that in a performant way. Like let's say we're viewing a massive file, like how do we do that performantly? I guess there's ways around it, like only wrapping what's currently visible to the user. Sort of
And I
thing.
believe
So
we
there's
do
probably
something like this now, yeah, like batched highlighting or something like this. And I noticed maybe we do something similar already. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're working to improve the way that we're doing the highlighting. My question or my idea is probably a little different. So this is for the code intelligence that we implemented, right? There's also Sourcegraph's code intelligence. If we end up starting to mangle the market too much, then we might start causing problems for the other people, for the other tool that might be piggybacking on the market. What I'm wondering though, you're saying that the backend returns the following points for code units, like start character in multiple different ways. The code that's handling that, so the code that's handling that, the start character, is that the character in the code? Or you said that it's a fourth span? Is the character in the code?
It's a character in the code, yeah, and like a tab is counted as a single character.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, character, and yeah, as I mentioned in the description, maybe to implement this logic, we also need an end character. Yeah, like start.
Sure.
Start
the
end.
Interval.
Yeah, and it can be implemented. Yeah, feel free to mention it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is we do have control on the code that applies that to the front end, right? It's our implementation. So I wonder if we could, when needed, when it's saying to insert this in a place where it doesn't have a span around it, the code could insert it, could inject it. We can have that chat in the issue. Thanks for raising visibility on that. We're already at time, but I'll add a comment there and see what we can do there, and then we'll see when it comes up in the prioritization. But thanks for bringing it up, Igor. We're at time, so I'll take this question last end to the Slack channel, so we can wrap up here, and then we can carry on. Just a formal thing. So, and the last of last questions, just was this call worth it? Please say yes or no. If we all agree that it wasn't worth it, we'll stop doing it. So for now, just answer that question, please, and see you next week.
Okay, thanks. See you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great evening.
Bye.